Have you ever stopped to think about how we got here? From working in a field with your hands to working from, well, a Zoom field on your laptop. The American job market has been on this wild 150-year ride. But what's crazy is that the story of how it changes, it's actually pretty predictable. So today, we're going to unpack that whole journey, from pure muscle power to the power of a mouse click. So here's the plan. We'll start with the big picture shifts. Then we're going to do a little time traveling, see how the American middle class was built, and then what made it all start to unravel. From there, we'll jump to today's kind of divided economy, look at why this keeps happening, and wrap up with the big question: what kind of work is actually left for us to do? Okay, let's dive right in. Section 1, the ever-changing American job. We got to start with the big shifts, right? These are the foundational changes that really set the stage for, well, everything else.
If you try to boil down a century and a half of change, it really comes down to these three massive shifts. First, we went from jobs all about physical labor to jobs that are about cognitive and service labor. Think brains and people skills. Second, where we worked changed completely. We went from farms and factories to offices, care facilities, and tech companies. And the third one is huge. We went from needing a massive, almost uniform workforce to what we call a polarized one. That means tons of growth at the high end and the low end, but the middle? It's getting squeezed.
So what's behind all this? Is it just random chaos? Not at all. There's a pattern. You can think of it like three giant engines that are always running in the background, shaping everything. You've got technology, which is constantly redefining what we do. Then there's globalization, which changes where we do it. And finally, you have demographics and social change, which affects what we need and who's even around to do the work. All right, section 2. Let's rewind the clock a bit. To really get what's happening today, we have to go back, way back to the time of our great-grandparents, and see how this whole idea of a stable middle-class job even came to be. So this period, from about 1870 to the early 70s, was all about building. It's a clear progression. It starts with pure, raw muscle on farms and in the first factories. Then that evolves into disciplined, repeatable work on the assembly line. And that whole process peaks in the post-war boom, which is when the classic, good job, the one that really became the American dream, was born. So let's start with that first era. Back in the late 1800s, the economy literally ran on brute force. This is before everything was mechanized, so the most valuable skill you could possibly have was just physical endurance. You want to build railroads, bridges, whole factories? It took sheer muscle, and let's be honest, it was often in incredibly grueling and dangerous conditions. And then, boom. Everything changed. Electricity starts spreading, the assembly line is invented, and suddenly, raw strength just isn't enough anymore. The new king? It's discipline. The most valuable skill became the ability to do the same exact task perfectly over and over and over again. That was the magic of mass production. And with that, something truly revolutionary for a lot of people started to appear: a stable, predictable paycheck. Okay, so this brings us to the post-war era. This was, without a doubt, the golden age for the middle-skill worker in America. The U.S. dominated global industry, unions were incredibly strong, and when companies became more productive, that money went directly into workers' wages. This is when the good job, with a clear career path, good benefits, became the absolute bedrock of a massive, thriving middle class. But, as we all know, that golden age couldn't last forever. And that brings us to our next chapter, the Great Unraveling. This is where the very foundation of that good job starts to crack, and it leads us directly to the economy we're all living in today. So what happened? Well, starting around the 70s, it was like a perfect storm of forces, all hitting at once. You had the oil shocks that destabilized the whole economy. You had the first real wave of automation starting to replace routine human tasks. And at the same time, you had fierce global competition really heating up. All of this started chipping away at that manufacturing core. And of course, as those jobs disappeared, so did the power of the unions that protected. And all this led to something economists call skill polarization. The best way to picture it is to think of the job market like a barbell, with the weights on either end and a thin bar in the middle. As all those predictable middle-skilled jobs, the factory work, the clerical work, got automated or sent overseas, the weights on the ends of the barbell got way heavier. We saw explosive growth in high-skill, high-wage professional jobs on one side and a massive expansion of low-wage service jobs on the other. And that bar in the middle, it just kept getting thinner and thinner.
So what does that great unraveling actually look like on the ground? Well, It's led us to today's two economies, the one we're all navigating right now.
And this chart, it shows that barbell effect perfectly. I mean, look at this. You can see it clear as day. Job growth is booming at the high wage end and the low wage end. But the middle, the traditional path to a stable middle-class life, it's shrinking. It really is like we have two totally separate economies operating at the same time. Okay, let's make this super concrete. The jobs that are growing today basically fall into two big buckets. You got the human-centered stuff, think healthcare, taking care of the elderly, and then you have the machine-centered stuff, software engineers, AI specialists. And what's declining? Well, it's pretty much any job that involves routine tasks, whether that's in an office or on a factory floor. Now, this whole story might seem kind of random and chaotic, right? But it's really not. There are these deep, predictable patterns, almost like rules of the game, that explain why this cycle just keeps repeating generation after generation. And wow, this table really just puts the whole 150-year journey on one page. Just focus on that core skill column for a second. Look at the evolution. We go from physical endurance to discipline and repetition to technical skill, then to interpersonal skills, cognitive abstraction, and where are we today? Creativity and empathy. If there's one thing to take away, it's this. The economy is always changing what it means to be a valuable human. So let's break down those structural forces. Think of them as the three big rules of how this all works. First, and this is so important, automation doesn't kill jobs, it kills tasks, usually the boring, repetitive tasks. This forces all of us to adapt and focus on the parts of our jobs that machines can't do. Rule number 2, there's always an education lack. Our schools and universities are almost always playing catch-up, teaching skills for the jobs of yesterday instead of tomorrow. And third, the inequality we see, it's not an accident, it's a structural outcome. It's the natural result of a system that's constantly rewarding a new set of skills while making old ones obsolete. Okay, so we've just been on this whirlwind 150-year tour. What's the final takeaway? Why does any of this matter to you right now? Let's talk about the work that remains.
Yeah, this quote really nails it. You always hear the panic, right? The robots are taking our jobs. But if you look at history, that's never actually been true. The US economy has never run out of work. What happens is we run out of the old kind of work. The real story here is a constant, relentless redefinition of what skills are valuable and who gets to benefit from them. So where is that value today? What work remains? It really boils down to two simple things. First, it's what machines can't do yet, the creative problem solving, the complex strategy. And second, it's what people still need from other people, the empathy, the care, the connection. That stuff isn't going anywhere. And that really leaves us with the big question we all have to think about going forward. As AI and automation get faster and better, we have to keep asking ourselves, what are the things machines won't be able to do? And what are the things we will always need from each other? Seriously, how we answer that question is going to define the future of work for all of us.